Hello, my name's Adrian, and today I wanted to tell you why you should definitely use Mobx for your next project, whether it's in React or React Native. Now, I've used dozens of state management systems in the past, but Mobx has to be one of my favorites, simply because it takes almost no boilerplate to get started for any project. Unlike Redux though, it's just never had that same level of popularity. So today I thought I'd give you an example of how to implement it in your project and just how simple it is to get started. Let's have a look. Now, I live in Australia and it's really hot right now, so we're working on a project called Bushfire Front. I want this project to present more information about Australian bushfires, and we're going to use Mobx to do this. We're also going to have a look at how Mobx uses observables, computes, and actions to just automatically update your data without you having to worry about it. So if you're ready to get started, hit that subscribe button because it really lets me know what kind of content you guys are after. And if you have feedback, leave it in the comments below and I'll try to improve my videos. Let's get started by first installing Mobx. Let's run yarn add Mobx and Mobx React. These will be the two dependencies that we'll be using in the project. So before we continue on, Mobx uses decorators. If you haven't heard of what they are those little @ signs you see before a variable or before a function. And React and React Native don't support them natively, so we'll have to add some extra configuration to allow those to work. Now, just a quick note, you can still use Mobx without decorators, it just doesn't look as tidy, so I'll show you how to add those now. We'll want to add the decorator proposal from Babel by running yarn add @babel /plugin -proposal -decorators. We'll want to next open up our babel.config.js file. In here, we'll want to add the value plugins. We'll want to create an array of arrays and add the package we just added @babel /plugin -proposal -decorators, and also add in legacy mode, which will be true. That's it. Let's rerun our application. And start testing out Mobx. Let's introduce you to observers and observables. I'm going to create a new component here called have you seen a bushfire.js. And let's use short syntax to fill this in. RNC, there we go. We're going to add this into our app's home screen as the new primary component. There we go. And here previously, where we had the home screen component, we'll replace this. Beautiful. Normally, React uses state and setState to update its components. However, Mobx works a little bit different. Let's remove this state from React and move the export component down below. We'll import Mobx and its observer from Mobx-React. We'll also import observable from Mobx. You can set an observable. You can set the observer under the class by decorating it. This will enable Mobx to function in this class. Next, we can get the observable and set it with a variable, in this case an array. So how does this actually work? Well, by decorating the fire variable with an observable, and making sure that this class is observed by Mobx, the re-renders will automatically happen anytime this variable is changed. This means that you can change the variable any way you wish. You can call it in a function, in a store, or even just manually within the component itself. Let's have a look at some examples of how we can do this. Let's start with something simple so you can see how this works. Let's create an observable fire message as a string. We'll pull this have you seen a bushfire above and call it inside the component. That's visible, and now we'll import text input from React Native. And let's see if we can change this variable on the fly by calling on change text val arrow function this.fire message equals val. Simple enough. Now, if we select the text input and change the message, it instantly updates. It doesn't have to call any additional functions like setState. It will automatically re-render every single time this value has changed. This is very useful, especially if you have stores that are very large and you simply want to change a value. So one thing to note is that you can pass this prop down to different components and it'll automatically cause re-renders. Here we'll create a test component, which will be functionless, with just some text. Let's pull in the fire message here and pass it as a prop. And we'll call this test component up here and pass that prop down. Perfect. However, if you remove the observer, React will not know to update automatically when you change the text input. So make sure that's in there for any components or parents. Mobx recommends that every single component has an observer. We can do this in lots of different ways, such as decorating it here with an extra bracket. This is essentially so it can be more efficient at causing renders for only the components that need them. Another very useful tool that Mobx provides is its computer decorator. This decorator has the ability to cause Excel-like reactions to your application when any variable has changed. Here, we're going to create a short fire. This will return a substring of the fire message. Of maybe 5 characters. Let's pull this into our application and see what it looks like. Now, whenever we type anything, Mobx automatically reacts by showing only the first 5 characters of the fire message. This also automatically reacts anytime you type. You don't have to worry about manually creating any syntax for this. This is very useful if you want to do things like calculate tags on the fly without manually having to have a function that causes a re-render every single time. Let's take a look at another example of how this can work. Let's create another observable called temperature, and we'll set this to 30 degrees because I'm still in Australia. Also, let's create a computed variable, and this one will automatically generate a Fahrenheit temperature from my Celsius range. Let's have a look at the formula required to make this happen. We have to do a curly bracket with the temperature, this.temp, and times that by 9 and divide by 5, and then we'll add 32. If we use this and put these variables in, we should automatically see that they update. Let's have a look at our application. As we can see, the results are the same as Google, which means they're right. We can also see if this works really quickly by changing the text input to update our temperature and seeing if the value for the Fahrenheit changes automatically as well. Beautiful. Finally, there's actions in Mobx. Actions are more explicit ways to mark a change in your state rather than just calling them on the fly. That way, you can be more explicit about knowing where things are changing inside your application. So in our example, we're using the text input, and we should probably change the onText handler to call in an action. Let's do this now by calling onChangeText, passing the value, and performing the same function. We'll call this inside of our component by calling this.onChangeText. This should automatically work. Well, it's a number. So yes, it does automatically work. We've got examples of an observer, observables, computed, and action. But now we want to access these anywhere in our application. Let's do this by creating a provider which we'll pass a store into. Let's first create our store here by calling store.js. Oh, we already have one. And in here, we've got a simple app store. Let's export this, call it app store. So this is as simple of a store as you can get. Right now we don't have anything in here, but we'll want to be able to access this within our application anywhere. We do this by calling a provider and passing the store in. Let's do this at the very top of our application. Import provider from Mobx React. Let's also import our store from store. Let's set this in the window object in case we want to use it for debugging later. We'll call const_store equals windows.store, which equals new app store, and we'll call the class to create it. Now, let's go to our main component here where we've got our navigator and pass in the store through the provider. Store equals store. Next, let's set a value for the store. Let's set the title as Hello World. And let's see if we can access this store. Let's see if we can access this store from our Have You Seen a Bushfire? We do this by importing inject from Mobx React. With inject, we pass the store we want to access. In this case, it's called store. Now it's accessible as a prop. Simply, we have to call this.props.store.title. If we do that, we see Hello World is now in our application. If we change the store to say hi, it should automatically update the application. We can now update the store from anywhere in our application. Let's use the onChange text handler we created earlier and see if we can update the store immediately using the text input. And we can, which is pretty cool. What's even more cool is the fact that we can now move these functions and actions into our class, and we can call them remotely. Let's do that now to see how it works. Let's set the action here from Mobx, and let's call this now as this.props.store.onChangeText. This essentially shouldn't look any different from our application, but now we can update the functionality directly from our store. Let's try that one more time after a reload. Perfect. I hope this has given you a good example of what it's like to use Mobx. If you have any questions or any feedback, please leave them in the comments below. I've added links to Mobx below as well, and hopefully this gives you a better idea of how to use actions, computes, observables, and its provider to access the store, which makes life a lot easier for starting any application. Thank you.